looking a little dicey there. Oh, hang on. Oh my goodness. Popped right out of the rack there. There we go. All right, folks. Can you hear me? Can you hear me out there? Give me a heads up if you can. Let me know if you got it okay. How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the program. All right. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of October, 2025. And can anybody hear me out there? Give me feedback. Come on. Live chat, not top chat. There we go. All right. I don't know if anybody can hear me, so I could be talking to myself. If you can't hear me, tell me you can't hear me. Okay, loud and clear. All right, good to go. Thanks. I was getting a little nervous there, whether somebody's going to tell me they heard me or not. All right, so guys, just a little update here. I recorded a video earlier this morning about a Washington Post article about South African refugees. Now, that article, or that video, come on, that video which I tried to post now going on a couple hours ago, has yet to load on YouTube. That article I identified in the title, the Washington Post, and as a consequence, maybe it's just happenstance, but that video, which normally it's high definition, gets uploaded, gets processed within a couple minutes, is still saying waiting to be processed almost 2 hours later, a couple hours later after I uploaded it. So this video I put down legacy media rather than putting the Washington Post, because I don't know if they're holding my video or not. But I'm going to talk about something here. So if you watch that video later on, I do apologize, because I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This primarily focused this news report. I do have some news. I'll cover the news, but I'm also going to talk about this story in the Washington Post today about Trump and the Afrikaner refugee program, which is not an Afrikaner refugee program. As rain clouds overhead, really nasty directly over me and further to the south here, but over to the northwest, it's perfectly sunny and the clouds are moving. So I don't know. I might be wet here in a short. Yeah. Well, I have to hope that video loads, so I'm going to try it again. Anyway, so this story here, let me explain to you very quickly what's going on. So the Washington Post ran a story about the refugees, 7,000 Afrikaners. In that story, they reference, I'm going to read this part here. That's what the video was about earlier. And I had a hard time recording the video because people were mowing lawns and everything. Very distracting. I had to keep stopping. But this is what the story said. Okay. So earlier it said that, this is late in the Washington Post article, though many of the fewer than 400 Afrikaners, first off, they're not 400 Afrikaners, there are coloreds and Indians in that mix. Their inability or their unwillingness to admit the truth shows either intentional effort to deceive the public, lazy journalism, or they simply aren't very bright. One of those three things. So the fewer than 400 Afrikaner families, which are not all Afrikaners, who've been resettled thus far, appear comfortable in their new home. Some have offered more cautious views of life in America, often focusing on difficulties finding employment or the higher cost of living. What the hell? Now some guy starts cutting the grass over here. Unbelievable. So they don't offer any examples of these some people who have difficulties with employment or higher cost of living. Now, I am actually in contact with well over 1,000 people who are in the pipeline to come to America. That's the true statement, folks. Over 1,000 people who are coming here. And I've already interviewed 18 of the, I've been in contact with about 18 of the 59ers already. Plus, I've interviewed a few people who've come over here subsequently. I'm not aware of this other than the family in Montana. The family that was placed in Austin, Texas, two families placed in Austin, Texas, who were ignored. I intervened, and the refugee assistance officers got on the scene and fixed the problem very quickly. So I'm not aware of people having difficulty finding employment or higher cost of living. So that may very well be the case. I'm not denying that, but they offer no evidence of it here. They just make a statement without any evidence, without any sourcing whatsoever. That's problematic. If you're going to make that claim because you're trying to paint a picture here, you need to tell people where you got the information from. So let me continue on with that. They give one example, and this example is complete distortion and a lie, an utter lie. Charles Kleinhaus, a South African farmer who arrived in the U.S. in the spring, was resettled in Buffalo, but within days he moved for a job he had found in South Dakota. In doing so, Kleinhaus, whose acerbic social media posts have faced backlash. How is that relevant to the story? They're just trying to paint a picture of him as a bad guy. Relinquished the housing assistance and other resources he was eligible to receive through the U.S. government. True. In an interview shared later on YouTube, Kleinhaus, who did not respond to requests for comment, said that a lack of domestic help was the biggest challenge for him. There's no kitchen lady you can call to sweep the house or clean the house or stuff like that. He said in an interview, you do the work. Now, first off, in an interview shared later on YouTube, they give a URL, Universal Resource Locator, a link to something else on the internet. That link takes you to the 6 August story by Rebecca Davies of the Daily Maverick, in which she commented accurately on what Charles Kleinhaus said in the interview that I conducted. I conducted the interview. So the Washington Post is referring to an interview that I conducted. I'm a known figure. I'm a source for newspapers in Washington, D.C. I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily find me on YouTube to contact me. But they didn't bother to contact me for their slimy story in which they lie. Maybe because they lied. So why do they give you a link to Rebecca Davis? This is a newspaper read by Americans by and large. Americans, most of them have never heard of the Daily Maverick. They're going to click on that and go to that. They don't know the veracity, the reliability, the type of reporting that the Daily Maverick does. I'm not besmirching Daily Maverick. I'm just saying people don't know. Now, Rebecca Davis has slandered me in the past. She's corrected the record and been more accurate in more recent articles, so I appreciate that. I think she was just being lazy the first time. So why they don't give the link to the video is just bullshit. That's just utter bullshit. Why do they not give the link? So either they're trying to distort the story by misleading people and directing them to a South African website that most Americans know nothing about, or they're lazy, or they're trying to hide my content. You decide. What do you think it is? What do you think it is? Now, look, folks, you know, Byron Shepard sarcastically called me the godfather of the refugee movement or something like that. And I took a little offense to that. And a lot of people said I'm the leading figure. Rebecca Davis called me the leading figure in the South African refugee thing. I dispute that. I'm not that. I'm an independent journalist who's honest about this. And I'm also a person who's helped some of these people. But my goal is not for anybody to leave South Africa. My goal is for people to live peacefully in South Africa. So whatever I am, I can no longer dispute that I am a person of note. How's that? A person of note in this process that's been happening because the dearth of information from my government, the false reporting, the lies from the media. So let's just I'll call myself a person of note. Why in the world would you give a link to a South African news story for American readers who know nothing about that site when there's an American, a reliable, credible source of information who's interviewed many refugees, who's been involved in this process since the very beginning? Why would you intentionally link to this Daily Maverick instead of mine? Again, lazy, or they intend to intentionally deceive people and not lead them to the article. You should see the comments. You should see the comments on the Washington Post article. Within 6 hours of going up, it already had 2,300 comments, and most of them were negative, and many of them attacked Charles Kleinhaus. Why? Because they make it look like, this is what they make it look like. They make it look like Charles Kleinhaus said, well, it sucks over here, man. I don't have a maid. Nobody's cleaned up after me. That is not what he said. That is not what he said. Completely taken out of context with his comments said. What he said is, this is a country where people expect you to get things done yourself. If you think you're coming over here and you're gonna have the ability to rely on a housekeeper or domestic help, that's not gonna happen. You don't get that over here. You work yourself. They lied. They lied. They contorted and distorted what he said. They also continue to lie throughout this story. So that was what my video was about by the Washington Post, which has not been uploaded to YouTube. I uploaded it. It's a high definition because I record on my mobile, which is 60 frames per second. So that video takes a little bit longer to process, 5 or 10 minutes. It has been now an hour and a half going on 2 hours since I loaded it on my YouTube account, and it hasn't processed. Now, why is that? Could it be because Washington Post are the first 2 words in the article title or the video title? I don't know. You tell me. But it's a shame because the Washington Post has somehow managed to get people who work in the government bureaucracy to betray their oath to the nation and disclose protected and classified information to the media. And some of it's very interesting. Some of it's very interesting here. So it's unfortunate. But let me go through this article and I'll point out a few things that are actually of worthwhile here, okay? So they talk about the State Department set a goal of processing 2,000 Afrikaners for resettlement by the end of October. That's not something that's been publicly known. They claim that the State Department responds to requests for questions, which I find funny because when I ask about this, the State Department refused to answer my questions, therefore forcing me to submit a Freedom of Information request because of their opaque behavior. But they say that the State Department told them this information. Okay, I'll accept that. It's a Washington Post. So 2,000 is the goal to be processed. That doesn't mean resettled, processed. And additional 4,000 by the end of November with a goal of total 6,000 before this year is even over. That's their goal. 2 people familiar with the matter speaking like some others on the condition of anonymity because they're not authorized to discuss administration's objectives. No, they're not. It's a violation of their oath to the Constitution and to this nation, betraying this nation, sharing information that's not publicly available, and there's a reason why it's not publicly available. So that's interesting. They also say that there are fewer than 400 have arrived. So obviously someone in the State Department that knows that information is leaking information saying fewer than 400. So given how unreliable the Washington Post has been in this article so far, what is fewer than 400? 399? I guarantee it's not 326. They would have said 326. I guarantee it's not 350. Or they would have said less than 400. They said yes. Anyway, fewer than 400. So let's say it's about 400. Okay, that's news we didn't know. They also said the administration had a goal of settling 1,000 people by the start of this month. That's October 1st. Now, that's something I shared previously in my analysis. I said it looks like they're trying to get a few thousand, at least 1,000, 1,500 or more over here before the end of fiscal year. Interesting. Turns out, according to a source for the Washington Post, that's exactly what they were doing, which once again means I was correct in my analysis. So then they go on saying that 700 Afrikaners are already waiting in South Africa to depart. They have 700 people who have been processed and told they can go. I can tell you of that 700 people, probably about 50 or 75 or 100 of those people have actually contacted me already. They're waiting to go, maybe more. That's just anecdotal what I recall. So a lot of people have told me they're waiting to go. They're saying 700. That makes sense. So if they already have 400 here, that would have been the 1,100 they wanted. All right. And the statement, they gave a statement. This is from a statement. The State Department released this. So this is public now. There are 700 Afrikaners, but they're not Afrikaners. They're not Afrikaners. First off, these dumbasses don't make the distinction between white people. Afrikaners are not all white people, but the Washington Post is not that bright. So many of these people are English-speaking South Africans. White. Some of them are Indians. Some of them are coloreds. But they keep calling them Afrikaners. Why? To throw disparity, to throw hatred towards these people who are coming over here because of uninformed bigots on this side of the Atlantic. So this is a statement that the State Department gave to them. Thousands, there are thousands more in the pipeline. That's the statement they released. Thousands more in the pipeline. Now, Mariska, I'm not picking on Mariska, but Mariska came up the other day. She read something that she got from the Amerikaners, or it's on their, or not Amerikaners, from RSC. It's on their website. And they said that the reason why people aren't coming over now is because the presidential determination has not been signed. I have been telling you since the flights were canceled, the most likely reason for that is because you have to have Americans involved in the process from USCIS and from PRM and from the embassy and from back here. Those people who work in those places have to be involved to process people. Because of the furlough and people not working, no budget, they're not working. Many of those people. Now, that's what I've said. Mariska disputed that the other day, and she offered information up from the RSC site. I also said that RSC has been an incredibly unreliable source of information when it comes to the Trump program. All you have to do is go back and look at their bum-hurt comments that they've been publishing since earlier this year, misleading and pushing fear-mongering into the public. That's all you got to do is go back and look at those things. So RSC may be very well correct about the presidential determination, but it's not a presidential determination. It is the report that is due to Congress annually on the refugee and asylum program, which has not been submitted to Congress. It's usually turned in August, September, usually by September. The administration's using the excuse that they can't do it because people aren't working because of the shutdown. Fair enough. So that's what RSC is telling people. That's why you're not flying out of South Africa. There's 700 people. I told you it's because there's no money for the people to process you. And this comes from the White House spokesman, Anna Kelly, in an email response. Unfortunately, for additional vulnerable individuals seeking to escape persecution, no refugees will be admitted until Democrats decide to reopen the government. Ladies and gentlemen, that's from the White House itself. The reason the White House is saying that people aren't coming over here right now is because the Democrats are voting against the flat continuing resolution. Not because the president hasn't signed the termination or the projection or the report. So once again, look, I'm not disputing my viewer. I appreciate that she shared that. What I'm telling you is that the sources of information that claim to be authoritative are often factually incorrect. Just because somebody says it's true doesn't mean it's true. My analysis is my analysis. It may not be true, but the track record is pretty damn good, isn't it? Isn't it? Pretty damn good. So let's continue with this story. Okay. Shortly after entering office, Trump issued an executive order temporarily halting the admission of most refugees, including those already vetted by the U.S. government. Actually, it halted all refugees. So that's factually incorrect. On January 20th, Trump suspended the entire refugee program for all refugees worldwide. Nobody can come over here. Hey, Joe. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm here this week. Yep. You're working full time now. All right. So, sorry, friend of mine. So that's a lie. Trump suspended for all refugees, not just some refugees. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing, including those already vetted by the U.S. government. That's correct. And we got a moaning story about 100,000 refugees who couldn't come over. That's nonsense. There were at most 15 or 20,000 refugees thereabouts that were waiting, but still, it's a lot of people. Pending a review. The review is over. The 90-day suspension has ended. The program is restarted. But the media lies about that. They don't tell you about the Afghans and the Iraqis that have been coming over here, do they? They don't do that. No. I've told you about that, but they won't tell you about that. Only one media outlet's mentioned. I think New York Times actually admitted that in one sense. Trump made an exception for Afrikaners who he said faced racial discrimination, a characterization rejected as unmoored from reality by South African officials and some Afrikaners themselves. Okay, so extreme right-wing hate-wanking Afrikaners have denied that there's anything going on because they don't want to see their population decline. We've seen that. They've run their mouth. They talk shit. We know who they are. Unmoored from reality. Oh, okay. You could have just said it's detached from reality. But the problem is that we can't trust South African officials. I've already exposed the fraud in South Africa's police reporting. South African criminal statistics are suspect. We know that for nearly 3 years in the teens, the South African government simply refused to report crime statistics in violation of the law and constitution because they were so damaging. And they just got away with it. These reports, a friend of mine's father-in-law was murdered on a farm in outside Brits in June, excuse me. I have the police report. I've shown it. I've exposed it. The police report says house robbery. It was not a house robbery. It's a home invasion. It was trespassing. It was torture. It was attempted murder. It was assault and battery, assault with a deadly weapon. And then they took a couple little items to make it look like a house robbery. And the police ignored it. So that is categorized as a house robbery, a break-in, not as a farm murder, not as a murder. Wasn't even listed as a murder, but the man was murdered. He died in hospital 3 days later from the grievous wounds. A 70-plus-year-old man sitting in a wheelchair after a hip operation, unable to walk, tied up and tortured for 8 hours, listed as a home invasion. You cannot trust the authorities there. So this shows ignorance on the part of the Washington Post or collusion with South Africa's government in lying about what's happening there. All right. So what else here? Trump made exception for Afrikaners. Wrong. Lie. Liar, pants on fire. Washington Post. Trump did not make an exception for Afrikaners. Trump made an exception, as I said, I hoped on February 7th, and was proven correct on February 10th, and have been correct over and over again as people come over here in the process, that the exception is for racial minorities. You dunderhead dumbasses don't know what a racial minority is, the Washington Post? Have you ever heard of Indians? Perhaps the term colored is something you're alien to you. Mixed race South Africans of a particular ethnic origin. They can come over here, and some have come over here. Yet the Washington Post says they make an exception for Afrikaners. No. Lies. The initiative begun in May. Actually, the initiative began in February. The first people arrived in May, and it was officially announced in May. But there were people who were processed, the 59ers, from February 10th until May 12th. So that's a lie, factually incorrect. Has experienced a slow start with fewer than 400 Afrikaners arriving in the U.S. as refugees. Once again, they're not all Afrikaners. That's a lie. Through the end of September, people familiar with the matter said, okay, well, the administration had an early goal of resettling 1,000 people by the start of October. We talked about that. I projected 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. According to the documents reviewed by the Post and people familiar with the matter, when it became clear that so somebody in the U.S. government is stealing documents and giving them to the media about this program, but the government won't release the information publicly when it's asked for. I, as a journalist, have contacted the State Department, and they refuse to answer my questions. Yet someone in the State Department is stealing the documents and giving them to the Washington Post. Wow. When it became clear it was unrealistic to process that many people, officials set a new target of getting 1,000 people processed for admission. That's their new target. By the way, Wednesdays with the Colonel will start at a half hour later today with Ronaldo and I. And I'm going to break this one early so I can get something to eat because I'm really starving here. And I need to also go get my earpiece so I can hear Ronaldo. All right, so let me continue with this article, and then we got a bit of other news, so don't run off. I've actually got some other news here to talk about, especially U.S. news. Others familiar with the situation say the administration's resettlement efforts have been slowed, at least in part, by Afrikaners themselves, with some changing their minds about relocating to the U.S. after going through security and medical screenings or electing to delay their journeys to sell property and belongings. All right. Again, I'm in contact with well over 1,000 people in the pipeline who've been processed, who've gone through this. I'm also in contact with many of the original 59ers, and I've been in touch with several of those subsequent arrivals. I am aware of one case. That doesn't mean I have all the information. I'm not claiming that. But I'm saying, given all the attention that comes my way from all these refugees and wannabe refugees, aspiring refugees, you would think that if there was more than one person who had delayed or changed their mind, I would know about it. I know of one case, and that's a partially disabled person in South Africa who asked to be delayed to go with a family that she's going to live with when she comes over to the States. That's not her blood family. That's it. That doesn't mean it's the only case. There may very well be many other cases. But where are these cases at? Who are these people? All right. And also, people delaying because they want to sell their property, that's not unreasonable. Now, the State Department rejected any suggestion that it had failed to reach its resettlement goal, saying in the statement to the Post that the refugee program was operating at record speed while upholding the highest standards, and that 700 Afrikaners were ready to travel to the U.S. when the ongoing government shutdown ends. Okay, there are thousands more people in the pipeline. So that's a statement they gave the Washington Post, but not to me. So if the U.S. government's unhappy about the portrayal of this program, it's their own fault for communicating with the Washington Post and not communicating with legitimate journalists like myself. Unfortunately, I already read that. Okay. In its final year, the Biden administration set the refugee admissions cap at 125,000 without any consent from the American people, with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Afghanistan among the top countries of origin. The Trump administration has said that approach posed a national security risk. Any refugee admitted to the United States must be in the national interest of our country, said Tommy Pickett, a spokesman for the State Department. Well, I agree with that. How you define that's a different story. The Trump administration is expected to announce soon that it is slashing the number of refugees it will resettle and putting a new focus on people who can speak English, according to a senior State Department official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the plan. Once again, someone speaking at a school who cannot be trusted. They've betrayed the nation. The cap could fall as low as 7,500, that person said, and documents reviewed by the Post. In other words, that person stole government property and gave it to the Washington Post. So another person who can't be trusted in this bureaucrat administration. Now, a recent report drafted by the State Department singled out free speech advocates in Europe as another group that could be considered in the future, said a former U.S. official who has seen the document, adding that it was clearly discussing far-right entities there. There is no ambiguity of intent, said the former State Department official. Who is this former State Department official who has access and is still getting access to documents in a place they no longer work at? I don't have access to documents that I worked on as an intelligence officer for decades. Why does this State Department person have access to people who leak information? With the push to resettle Afrikaners, again, a misstatement, a lie, the resettlement is for racial minorities in South Africa, whites, coloreds, and Indians, not Afrikaners. The U.S. also cut out the international bodies that help coordinate resettlement efforts. That's true. UNHCR is no longer part of this process because they were part of the problem. United Nations Refugee Agency, for instance, had previously made referrals to the State Department, which in turn screened those candidates. But in South Africa, that step is being conducted in part by Amerikaners, an advocacy group founded by Sam Busa, a South African woman of British descent. Busa declined to comment. Well, I'm of English, German, Viking, Dutch, Danish descent. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? And why do they mention the Amerikaners? They're only doing a small portion of the referrals. Most of the referrals are being screened by RSC, a subsidiary of Church World Services. Why does the article not include that context? You know why? Because the intent is here to say that white people are helping white people and white people are evil. That's what this is all about. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. But in South Africa, that step is conducted in part by Amerikaners. But the hate wankers that read the Washington Post won't read in part. They'll skip right over. Oh, white people are doing this. Of course, yes. So what about RSC? See, that's context. That's genuine reporting. That's truth in reporting. That's the truth in reporting. That's the truth in reporting. I told you both RSC and the Amerikaners. And when it was unclear the Amerikaners were involved, I said, we don't know. Until we have confirmation, we're not going to make that claim. But see, these people neglect to put the full story in there. Under Trump administration's updated procedures, many Afrikaners are being vetted in as little as a week. People familiar with the matter say that's a lie. That's impossible. I don't know anybody who has been contacted and got a provisional approval letter within a week. It's impossible. You can't even schedule medical appointments within a week. Even if you were told ahead of time, your appointment's on Monday, your medicals are on Tuesday, you wouldn't have that information on Friday. That's impossible. Someone's lying now. I call bullshit on that. State Department has acknowledged moving through the process more quickly, but says standards remain high. Despite the Trump administration's moves to fast-track the admissions process for eligible South Africans, a small portion of those processes have so far been resettled. One significant issue, said people familiar with the matter, is the reluctance of some Afrikaners to relocate when the opportunity to do so is presented. During the third week of September, for instance, State Department officials booked and paid for 50 seats on commercial flights from South Africa to the United States, but only 3 people wound up traveling. Bitter Andrews, thank you for the 20 Rand super chat. Only 3 people wound up traveling. Now that one I find hard to believe. Also, it's cherry picking. What about the second week of September? On one day in September, 26 people came over. How about context of that? We know that from Letitia. On the flight, she came over on that one plane. There were 26 refugees. 26. One day, 26. But they only tell you about the third week of September. In a statement to the Post, the State Department said, this is not abnormal. It's not. It's often the case that seats on U.S.-bound flights are bought in bulk and that some end up canceled. The statement says, by sharply limiting the number of refugees overall who are allowed into the U.S., the statement notes the Trump administration secured a significant cost savings for the American people. The situation also is unusual, as traditionally most refugees who seek resettlement have fled their homes, often to a refugee camp or third nation. In the past, many refugees had already lost everything they owned, said Ann Richard, a senior official in State Department's refugee office during the Obama administration. And of course, Ann Richard and her comments, whether she said or not, this is once again an act of omission. As I've said from the outset on February 7th, this is an unusual situation. It's called in-country refugee status. We've done it for Cuba, we've done it for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and a handful of other countries. It is not the normal path. One of the reasons why this took so long, as I said from the outset, is it will take time for the State Department, with its wet-nosed 22-year-olds who don't know anything about the world, and the political appointees who just come in, to get their hands around this, because they don't know anything about it. They haven't done it before. The number of people who have been there, who've done in-country resettlement, is probably infinitesimally small. And the procedures are therefore dusty and have to be cleaned off. So, whether she said or not, I'm not going to pick on Ann Richard for this, but I'm going to pick her in a second. So listen to this. Most refugees who seek resettlement have already fled their homes. Yes, because it's not in-country resettlement. There's no mention of that in this Washington Compost article. This is an act of omission or ignorance on the part of lazy journalists, not telling people there's a reason for that. Because it's in-country resettlement, you dingbat doorknobs. Jeez. Now, Richard said that it was possible that some of the Afrikaners generally do qualify as refugees who merit resettlement, but that the process appears to be working based on a quota rather than a need. Now, what is the basis for Miss Richards, a former Obama official, not in the State Department, making that claim? She may have a very good basis for it. Maybe she knows a spy in the State Department that's leaking information to her. Maybe she knows. But how does she know? She can't log in to State Department accounts and see databases and look at files and see the condition for people coming over here. So how does she know that it's a rush for quotas and not that these are legitimate? Has she reviewed the 59ers cases? Has she reviewed the other 700 that have been approved? Has she seen any of these cases? She's talking out her ass. And the Washington Post doesn't even question it. They publish it as if it's a fact because she's a former Obama official. She goes on to say the obvious, which is what I said. Refugees have to make their case. They have to apply, and then their cases are reviewed. Duh. Instead, Richard said the Trump administration seems to be trying to make some sort of case about reverse racism rather than having smart reforms. Okay, first off, Miss Richard, there's no such thing as reverse racism. Racism is racism. Whether you're white, see, here comes the sun. Whether you're white, black, blue, brown, or green, racism is racism. Discriminating against people based on their skin pigmentation is flat out racism. It doesn't matter whether it's being done by whites to blacks, or blacks to whites, or whites to whites, or blacks to blacks. It's racism. The term reverse racism is an oxymoron. It's a stupid phrase. And for people who use the term, it shows their lack of education and their lack of literacy. It's dumb, 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 dumb. Good Lord, that's a bright sun. It's one gap in the sun and the clouds are coming back. All right, man, now I'm squinting like crazy. So, though many of the foreign Afrikaners, this is the part about Charles Kleinhaus earlier. Yeah, they lie about Charles Kleinhaus. I mean, he never said that. That's completely a complete mischaracterization of what the man said. All right, so Oregon Democrat Senator Jeff Merkley just won't shut up. He started a filibuster in the Senate, which is his prerogative, and he said, Trump is shredding our Constitution. You know, I love this from people who probably never read the Constitution. They have no concept of what the Constitution is about. They're just talking out their backside. They really have no concept of what the Constitution is. They don't know. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. It's crazy. So, he did a 12-hour and maybe longer. I don't know when it ended because the press was unclear. CNN failed to report when the damn thing ended. But he did at least a 12-hour filibuster starting at 6:30 last night until this morning. Just running off of the mouth, diarrhea coming out of his mouth, complaining about America, complaining about Trump. And what about this obsession with the East Wing? Back in the 1980s, Nancy Reagan purchased New China for the White House, and the media lost their minds. They fraudulently reported and said that she was using taxpayer money and that this was all just wrong, and who is she getting dishes for herself? I mean, Nancy Reagan's been dead for several years and been out of the White House for 40 years, 30-some years, almost 40 years. What is her getting dishes for the White House have to do with her? Nothing, except it's a legacy she left behind. Those dishes were all purchased with private funds. No state money was used, no taxpayer money. Donald Trump is renovating the White House, the East Wing of the White House, and building a big state ballroom for state functions when we host heads of state and officials from abroad. There's no state money involved, yet the media and the left are losing their minds over the East Wing expansion. Absolutely losing their minds. They're freaking out, left and right. Who is Trump? Using taxpayer money. I mean, the number of things I saw on Twitter this morning before I went to work was just absolutely insane. Blaming Trump for using taxpayer. There's no taxpayer money involved. My internet provider, Comcast, is one of the big donors. The Comcast family under Brian Roberts is giving money to the White House ballroom, a leftist media company. But they don't tell you that because they just lie. All right. Maine Democratic Senate candidate Graham Plattner, a Democrat, who apparently had a skull and crossbones tattoo on his chest, got that when he was a Marine, was accused of having a Nazi tattoo on his body. Said he didn't know it was a Nazi symbol, and he's since had it covered up. A few meek reports on that. Meanwhile, the Democrats still claim, including Senator Merkley, claim that Portland is not an insurrectionist location. It's not. There are no riots. Apparently, he doesn't watch the video footage on Twitter or the nightly news reports of the nonsense going on in Portland. It's a city in chaos, and he claims that nothing's happening there. John Sununu, former senator from New Hampshire, has announced he's throwing his hat in the ring. He's going to run for Senate again from New Hampshire. Now, that's going to put a wrinkle in there. Don Bolduc, I guess, probably won't run now because Sununu's name is synonymous with New Hampshire. By the way, Sununu, is that an Anglo-Saxon name? Anybody know? Sununu, is that Anglo-Saxon? Can somebody tell me if that's Anglo-Saxon? I'd just like to know. Is that Anglo-Saxon? No, it's not. It's Arab. It's an Arabic name. John Sununu is, if I'm not mistaken, Lebanese extraction. Could be wrong. Could be Syrian. But anyway, yeah. So look at that. The Republicans, they have a big tent. Black folks, white folks, colored folks. Oh, not colored folks. That's a South African thing. No, Trump is not paying for the renovation out of his pocket. He's paying for some of it, but Comcast is a donor. It's $250 million, and a lot of people are paying for it. A lot of people are paying for it. Yep. I haven't seen the Colonel, so something a long time. Well, listen, folks, I mean, I'm irritated. Here's why. Because these hate wankers go on the Washington Post, and they start attacking Charles Kleinhaus over an interview that I did with him. All right? Now, they hide the interview by giving a reference, a URL to the Daily Maverick. Why? Why not take the time when Charles Kleinhaus wouldn't talk to you to reach out to me, Washington Post, and ask me for an interview about that conversation or about the program, since I've been right about virtually everything in this program since the outset? Why not do that? That's why I'm a little miffed. So instead of people going to watch the video, and clicking, because they'll click on the Go Daily Maverick, like, what's this? And they have to scroll all the way down to the bottom before they find the story where Rebecca Davis introduces the interview that I had with Charles. Nobody's going to go there. And there's a link to the video there. But it's disingenuous to them, because what they're doing is this. They're reporting with that link on what another newspaper said. They're reporting a news story in a news story. That's not news. That's copycatting. That's what that is. They're not offering any analysis. Now, I'm offering analysis of news. When I give you a news story like this one here, I'm giving you analysis. I'm breaking it down for you. They're simply reporting something that they claim was there. For honest and straight journalism, expert analysis, keep up a high standard. Thank you, Urban Homestead Africa, 350 Red. Yeah, I mean, so why did they not put the link? Either they're lazy, stupid, dishonest, or it's an intentional effort to besmirch Charles or Charles Kleinhaus, which I think is the effort here. Yeah. You're right. The truth that I speak doesn't support the narrative. That's why they hide it. Absolutely. Absolutely the case, folks. That's true. Yeah, they're thick. Lazy. I mean, okay, so folks, another major media outlet contacted me at 3 o'clock in the morning last night to quote, because this came out at 1 o'clock in the morning. They published it after midnight. I didn't see it because I didn't go read the Washington Post before I went to bed. And so they published that. And then someone in South Africa, who's in a major media outlet that's an American outlet, and I'll leave it at that, contacted me, someone I've been in contact with for months now, and asked me for, information about this and if they could get in touch with people. And I said, well, the New York Times ran a story. I haven't followed up on that person. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah. Just shameful behavior. You're very welcome. You're very welcome for the update. Let me just check on something here. It is now, okay, 8 after. Okay. I have to make sure, see if Ronaldo's come up here. Where is that? I got to look real quick here. That's not what I want. Shoot. Come on. That's what I want. I'm sorry if I'm still there. Hopefully I'm still there. Okay, I'm still there. I was trying to see if Ronaldo wrote to me. Where is Nati hiding? I have no idea where Nati's hiding, Garrett. No idea. But anyway, folks, yeah. No, haven't heard from Ludwig. I haven't heard from Ludwig for a while. Do I see cloud? Yeah, you see clouds gathering. It was clear, then it was cloudy, then it was clear again. And it's actually got quite chilly out here. I put a hoodie on. I was walking around with a polo shirt when I recorded the first video, which YouTube hasn't posted yet. At least they hadn't when I started live with this. Anyway, I really hate to break off here, but I have to break off here shortly because we got 500 people here. That's awesome. See, that's the thing about these mobile ones. When I do these, somehow they get promoted. 350 rands from Gideon. Thank you for taking your time, Colonel. I'd like to clarify so much for us. Your heart pure. Thank you. Thank you. I think so too. And I'm pure. If refugees want to interviews with media in the U.S., they need some media training from the Colonel. Yeah. Well, I mean, my argument is just come on my channel. You get treated fairly and you won't be exploited. I mean, if you want to hide your identity, maybe anonymous, we do that. If you don't want to say where you're from, we don't ask where you're from. We're just here to talk about your experience. That's all. That's what it's about. And some refugees have offered, others who are coming over offered, others who've come over haven't offered. Some who watch my channel, use my channel for their own benefit, and they've taken off. That's their prerogative. They don't know me anything, but it's a shame that they do that. Yep. So Bonnie Duplicity, we appreciate it, Colonel. Well, thank you so much for the 50 rand, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Clouds are gathering, Tata. Hey, Tata. Over here, Tata. Listen to me, Tata. Minia. Listen, Minia. Oh, Kathy, you missed a lot. You need to go back and watch from the outset. You need to go back and watch this from me. By this 514 of you still here, 378 likes. What's that all about? A like is free. All you have to do is push that damn button. Colonel's the only place to do an interview. Yeah, well, I think so. It's the only place you're going to get treated fairly. Yep. And you're not going to be exploited based on what we've seen so far. Yeah, what we've seen so far. Anyway, so I'm just a little bit miffed about that. And I'm even more miffed about the fact that YouTube hasn't published my video, which I put up some time ago now, going on 2 hours ago. So I don't know what the holdup with that is. I think it's because I put Washington. I went back and changed the title and said Legacy Media. But it still hasn't posted. Anyway, Elmarie Swart, thank you. Thank you for your membership. You're very welcome. Yeah, anyway, somebody just said they will do the interview. Are you already in the States? I will do an interview. And Doug, yeah, didn't you comment the other day? I asked one of the mods, put up an email address real quick. So anybody wants to do an interview, contact me, okay? Your video, Legacy Media, South African refugee story full of distortions, just became available. Oh, okay, just became available. All right, that's probably because I took the Washington Post off. Thank you, Gabrielle Stoltz. Just became available. I published that 2 hours ago, and it said processing will begin momentarily. Usually it begins within seconds, and it's over within 5-15 minutes, depending on the quality of the video. This is high definition. Anyway, apologies for that video, but I had people with the weed whackers trimming. Woo! I had guys suddenly show up with lawnmowers, the big ride. Woo! And then, you know, people banging on stuff. I had to stop the video. I did one video for 2 minutes, 20 seconds, and it just got so distracting. I scrapped it, which is a shame. And then I went to this one, did it, and I had to stop it twice. You can see me reaching up and stopping the video because I kept getting interrupted the noise. The good news is I use this microphone, which drowned out most of the background noise. So anyway, yeah, so there you go, folks. 517 people currently here, 420 likes. You're still sitting on your bums. Hit the like button. Why not? Come on. You don't, okay, if you don't like the video, but you're still watching it, then I question what's going on with you. Anyway, I will be back here shortly with Ronaldo unless he's bailed on me. I already did a news program this morning, so that's why I focused on this and gave you a little bit of U.S. news here. Not much exciting happening in South Africa from what I can see. This usual corruption here, corruption there, mass shooting here, mass shooting there, you know, political parties, you know, pecking at each other, you know, so it's South Africa. It's another day on the calendar. Anyway, folks, thank you all for being here and for pushing the like button. We just drove it up to 438 for the 512 people left. And I will be back with Ronaldo at the bottom of the hour. I got to go get my Bluetooth piece so I can hear him. And I've also got to go order a sandwich so I've got something to eat. Okay. I shall return. Thank you all so much. I hate to go with 500 people watching. I got lots of more stuff to share. But anyway, thank you for letting me know that video just went live. Okay. Appreciate it. Again, it's probably because I took Washington Post off the title. I need to go back and change the Washington Post to see what happens. Please go watch that video while you're waiting for Ronaldo on Wednesdays with the Colonel. I can't redirect you there because I don't have access to that on my mobile. Cheers, folks. God bless. Take care. 453 likes. We're getting closer. Getting closer.